Okay, well, welcome everyone to our 2025 Ask NPSMA presentation series. So today our webinar is entitled From Insight to Action, Key Takeaways from the NPSMA Workforce Advisory Council. And before we jump in, I'd like to just mention a few things. So first, we have our title for our 2025 National Conference. So that's in November, and it is entitled Bridging Innovation and Application, Advancing Careers Through Master's Programs and Industry Collaboration, and that'll be held in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. A few other things I encourage you, if you're interested in things NPSMA and things professional STEM masters, to sign up for our monthly PSM newsletter, which is done through email. And so you can just drop your email in the comments to me if you're interested in that. And then also keep an eye out for our publications. We have the Innovator, where we share best practices, and we have the Chronicle, where we feature PSM alumni and graduates. If you are interested in getting involved with the NPSMA, we would love for you to join us for different committees. And you can ask any of us on the board about this. And again, if you are interested, you can drop your email in the chat to me during this session. And we encourage everyone to become members of the NPSMA. And here are some of the benefits to membership. So we give reduced rates for the national conference, presentation opportunities for PSM students at the annual conference. We maintain a close relationship with Council of Graduate Schools, which can result in presentation opportunities and NSF grant opportunities. Case in point, we have our monthly Ask NPSMA webinars, and all of the past Ask NPSMA webinars can also be found on our YouTube channel if you'd like to see some of the recordings of previous ones. And sometimes we do also run PSM-focused virtual recruitment fairs. We have a social media presence, so we encourage you to connect with us here. We are on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, as we mentioned before, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So we have Megan Dovick. Dr. Megan Dovick, she is the director of the Professional Master of Science and Technology program at the University of Utah. And Terry Woodburn, Dr. Terry Woodburn, program director for the Professional Science Master's program in, oh, I didn't mean to close that. Okay, well, at the University of Kansas. So let me end my share here. Okay, so with that, I think we can start off our panel discussion. Maybe I'll kick it over to Megan and Terry quickly if you want to give a quick introduction, and then we can jump into the discussion. So Megan, do you want to kick off? Megan is our NPSMA president.
Thank you, Marcel, and hello to everyone who is joining us today. It's really lovely to see people at our monthly Ask NPSMA. Yes, so a little bit more introduction just to myself and my background and relevance to today's panel. Is that the ask, Marcel?
Yeah, and that, this also will be on YouTube. So we may have people who've watched this who don't know us.
Okay.
Thinking maybe a quick blurb.
Wonderful. Yes. So my name is Megan Dovick. I'm the director of the Professional Science Master's programs at the University of Utah. I am also currently the 2025 president of NPSMA. What is NPSMA and what is PSM? PSM and the framework around it are workforce-aligned STEM education academic pathways for graduate students in the master's sector. We have a long history in the late 1990s in which this organization and the idea of PSMs were coined out of industry demand, saying we need we love the technically trained, but we need more professional scientists in that are prepared to go into industry. Essentially, we need more professionals ready to enter the workforce. That's where the framework and the idea and the coined term PSM came about, which then created this organization through a few different versions of what we have today. But ultimately, it's always been an organization and community that is around shared best practices, and then also creates frameworks and best guiding practices for other PSM programs, or those programs that want to have the spirit of what is a professional master's. Um, I'm trying to think of, is anything else that I'm missing, Marcel? Any highlights that you were hoping that I was going to cue our audience and anyone watching?
Oh, I think that was a good start.
Okay.
Thank you, Megan. And then Terry.
So I am Terry Woodburn. I am president-elect this year, stepping into Megan's role starting in 2026. But one of the things that Megan misstating that applies to today's is that each and every PSM or NPSMA affiliated program is founded on an advisory board. We have our own NPSMA Workforce Advisory Council, and we had the meeting with them, and this is just showing best practices. Getting that information that we obtained from the WAC, we are actually putting that into play, because every single time we have an external advisory board for my program, I never want to let those notes sit. I don't want them to be shoved in a drawer or in a file somewhere that I never look at them again. I want to make sure that those nuggets of information are put to use in some shape with our program, whether it be program improvements, connections for the students. Whatever I pull out of our external advisory board, I want to make sure it's put to work. So that's what we're doing today. We're actually showing what type of information did we gain from the WAC and where are we going with that. And we're actually putting it into much bigger use, because you're going to be seeing a lot of this information come into, in much more detail than we can get into today, into our national meeting coming up in November.
Yes, thank you so much for kind of bringing it back to the grounding. I got a little sidetracked there as well. So a little bit more what we have prepared for you today, and to open today's discussion. Again, Terry and I are kind of on the panel, but again, this is always about bringing in conversation and comments from everyone attending today. At the national level, we work with a variety of professionals that have some sort either affiliation or a supporter of professional masters. We work with our advisory board there. We get insights just as we would at your local and program level. We do it at a national level, find alignment, and then take insights from there and then share it out broadly with our community. So that is kind of where we're at. Marcel, I'll kick it over to you now.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Megan and Terry. Yeah, so this is a very nice opportunity for us to reflect on feedback and our discussion that we had with the Workforce Advisory Council. You'll hear WAC thrown around a lot, but that's the acronym where it comes from. So maybe just to set the stage a little bit, in our meeting with the WAC, we had colleagues from forensic sciences, material science, genetic medicine and rare disease medicine, sports medicine, Starbucks, FIFA, as in soccer, and Harvard Law School. So we had quite a diverse set of perspectives on the Workforce Advisory Council. And I think the format that we'll have is we'll talk about some of the topics that we discussed in depth with the council. And, Terry and Megan are our panelists, and so they'll comment on things. But then also we want to have as Terry or as Megan had mentioned, we want the floor to be open. So we want people to jump in and make points or ask questions as we go along. So with that being said, the first topic was about the need to stand out. So in this current environment, PSM graduates are still very highly valued, but the council focused on the fact that people really need to stand out. In particular, competition has become much tighter in recent years. And so let's start with some thoughts on that. So Terry or Megan, would you like to start?
So one of the things that comes to mind with this, standing out, the PSMs are great with already. We are focused on those transferable skills, not just the technical skills, which yes, those are all very highly needed, but we're also providing the students with those transferable skills.
Quantify polyamine levels.
So it's all about figuring out
is
how to sell those skills, how the students can communicate and sell those skills. But I'm going to use this time as a little bit of a pitch because PSMs, this is what we do. This is what we've been training for years to help our students do. But we have new resources available. And if you haven't yet, we sent out previously a contact to get into our NPSMA Canvas site. This is where we're actually building a lot of resources into. It is new, it's still growing, but you're going to be finding a lot of tools to help you teach these transferable skills within your classes.
I can add on a little bit to that. So the first topic, how do students stand out in a competitive market, and how can programs that do more aligned with this professional application, how do we make that or help advise and teach our students? Definitely the transferables. We all know that. We teach that. More specifically, I'll get a little more granular. Really focusing on how students can do situational storytelling. So if they have an actual transferable skill, such as like, oh yes, I am an amazing, analytical thinker, but be able to prep our students into how to articulate that. That is the biggest one, is that sometimes our students have a hard time connecting the dots of what the professional skills that they gain in programs like ours and other just graduate programs that are working on these transferable skills, but they don't know they can't see it. So for instance would be Terry, you do a really great job at this, and I've actually taken this from one of your classes. At one of our conferences, Terry shared this out. I thought it was a very easy thing to integrate fast. Take a STEM course that you're teaching, and a part of that course is, fill in the blank there, but then you translate it to them and say, by completing this module, by completing this lesson, you've actually had the opportunity to improve this professional skill. And then you tell them what professional skill they have gained. So, practicing management leadership. By completing this activity or this skill, you've done this, so that you give them already the cues on how to do that situational storytelling to stand out. So when they say, oh, have you had any leadership opportunities, instead of them saying, they can't think of anything, they're like, actually, I do. I've had this. It's already been connected for me. And it's just top of mind for a lot of our students. So that's one, just connecting the dots for them. And then the other one is, and while I'm kind of I have kind of this adverse reaction to this social media going into that, everyone I've talked to recently around workforce development is definitely saying LinkedIn. Make sure your students have a very good LinkedIn. Teach LinkedIn, overhauls, how to make your students stand out, how to use the words that they are doing. One quick tip that I was in a conversation with a company who does this. And one of his hot tips was that instead of listing all your accomplishments in the accomplishments section, rewrite it so it's actually in your about section, which is at the, again, top of mind. So when recruiters or people come to look at your LinkedIn, your accomplishments are actually already integrated into your about. So it's at top of mind. So I would say quick things, high level, the skills that Terry mentioned, and then granular, some specific examples.
One of the things that we can't really teach students, but we can nudge them, make sure that they understand that they should be doing this, is for them to take initiative. They need to explore jobs in detail. They need to explore the companies. They need to reach out to people. They need to network. And that does take them having initiative to realize that this is important. This is something that I need to do to build my professional network and to give them opportunities to do that.
Absolutely. Something, again, this is very specific to something that we do in my program, but job exploration, we work it into a 16-week professional development course. So for 16 weeks, and we're doing it through, we relate it to a traditional research method, but the topic is job exploration. So we're making them do 16 weeks of data analysis onto the career that they want. And it's not a one-time find three job postings that you would like to be one day, and then come and let's talk about those 3 job postings and job exploration. That's not enough. And I think that's exactly what you were saying there, is like, we really have to prompt them. How do we do that? We relate it to how they understand concepts. So if our audience are STEM students, then relate something that's a non-STEM concept to them so that they will actually do it. So, all right, what's your data source? Start data mining, and just the topic is jobs and it's themselves. And then, all right, how do we visualize that? What are your correlations that you're finding? Okay, how do you translate that then to, almost an abstract, your overview? Then how do you take that and create a plan out of it? Like next steps, recommended research next steps are things that you can actually test now, or which includes the professional development. They will all see that it takes professional networking and the next steps. So another tangible example.
One thing that struck me along those lines, in terms of social media presence and networking, was one of the WAC members said, a WAC member who hires a lot of people said, I haven't read a cover letter in years. And that really stuck with me, because I know, from at least from my last job search years ago, cover letter was everything. And now some people aren't even looking at them, and it's this presence and networking that is so much more important.
I agree.
Does anybody else have any thoughts or want to weigh in?
I agree about the comment about the cover letter. It may be a thing of the past soon, if it hasn't already. And I do agree with, I would say the only thing about social media posts besides LinkedIn is make sure that you are instructing your students to clean up their social media as well, because I've had a student who, when he was 14, used bad language on one of the social media sites, and the employer was able to find it and said, I don't like the way he speaks about women, and he used this language, and I don't feel safe hiring him. And so that came back to me as an instructor by my external advisor, which I really appreciated, because they could have just rejected him and that would have been the end. They actually accepted him. He's doing really well in his job there. But we had some exchange, and we spoke to the student, who at that time was 26 years old. And he says, why am I being penalized for something I did 12 years ago? I was a kid. I was an idiot. I'm a professional. I didn't even know this was out there. So, but just fortunately for him, it worked out well. But I think it's important what you put on your social media.
That's amazing. So at age 26, something from age 14. Wow. Beth, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I was just gonna reiterate what Seema said. It's not just posting, it's what you post. On LinkedIn is your professional self, right? And so be intentional about what you are going to post about. What do you want to tell the world about you? And then my other caution is be cautious about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a tool and it can really help a lot, but just be aware that if you're going to use artificial intelligence, make sure that you use it in the right way and make sure you let other people kind of know that you're using it. So that's all I got.
What was interesting from the insights of our recent WAC meeting too, going on the LinkedIn and with like the resume, we kind of, you know, sometimes as academics, we're like, oh, LinkedIn, you know, we don't go to it as much, but we asked our advisor area, we're like, what do you think about that? You know, one person mentioned that we need to make sure we have a LinkedIn presence. Every single one on our committee goes, I absolutely go to my LinkedIn of my top candidates and look at their LinkedIn and do kind of the LinkedIn scroll. So sometimes we may not feel like it's a necessary thing, but if the end product is to be industry facing or more in that route, then those students who want that path, they absolutely need to have a presence of some sort, because employers go to that over the resume is what we found out.
Yeah, LinkedIn certainly has become the standard, and we see it on the industry side. Well, okay, so let's think about the second topic of discussion, which is industry hiring trends. So we do see trends that are shifting in industry, and the WAC had some interesting points to make about that. So maybe Terry, did you want to speak at all to that?
So a few things that the WAC mentioned that I've also been seeing within our sector, and my sector is the environmental realm, but they were saying in multiple sectors that the remote jobs are diminishing. They're pulling back into office. So that's what we need to be prepping our students for. They're no longer going to be going out looking for those remote jobs. If that's what they're interested in, you might have to reroute their understanding of what the job market looks like. As we were just mentioning, AI has been in increasing use, and some of that is just basically reviewing those resumes that come in. So a lot of things get kicked out of those pre-screening. So I'm training my students on resume format, what we can put in a resume to make that nice, but again, going to LinkedIn and making sure that they have that LinkedIn post and a good quality one. But on the other end, AI is also being used in everyday work. We just heard from our external advisory board, who are a lot of government agency officials. They said the government agencies are now openly using AI. That is what they're being pushed towards in order to do some of their technical reports quickly and efficiently. And what previously used to be a very thorough one-year process is now done in 2 weeks. So they are having to embrace AI, and they're being pushed to be embracing AI, but it means understanding how to use AI ethically. So that's something that if we can put it in our courses, we want to make sure that we are guiding those new to industry or changing positions in industry to use AI ethically, what to watch out for with AI that is not doing us any good, that is creating more problems than good. But also thinking about that for a job opportunity, because yes, we're going to have a lot of more AI use, which means data, pulling data, maybe even using it for data-driven forecasting, but we have to have students who are good at evaluating the outputs. So those were some of the big things that came across for me with both that and our local external advisory board.
I think that it was interesting. So we had this WAC meeting a few months ago. And it was just as we were talking about, you know, hiring trends and what we're seeing in sectors. And even at that time, things were evolving with the political landscape. And even now, I would say, you know, it's continuing to evolve and change almost daily. And so it's interesting, as I was reviewing my notes from that meeting, I'm like, okay, how much of this is still, hiring trends, and how are they shifting? And so some of the things that we mentioned then, at least, was that there was a slower hiring trends in a lot of the biotech sectors. Um, Startups and large biotechs are hiring a little bit more cautiously right now. And and across the board, I would say in all the sectors, to Terry's point, was this call of come back to office. And it wasn't just the small local companies. These were the Starbucks of the world. In fact, Starbucks was like, no, we are having people come back into office. We're not doing fully remote anymore. And they're making people, and it's been a shift in jobs that way, because those that are saying they can't do that or they don't want to, then there has to be an exit strategy for that. So yeah, being transparent with your current students, who, when they go into that job exploration, or their expectation is that, oh, I'm definitely going to get this remote position, they may have to be a little bit more flexible if they want to start off in the field or start off in whatever sector they want. Other things that tend to be still very strong are the engineering fields and the applications of that. So engineering, semiconductors, finance is still very, very strong in terms of some of the insights we got there, and what I'm seeing also in workforce development as well. And then those that are supporting those roles. So an interesting trend, which doesn't quite relate probably to most people in this room who are focuses as master's level, but we're seeing a huge demand in the apprenticeship and the technical trades. And for an example, here in the state of Utah, we're seeing a high demand need for like HVAC trained certified technicians. And so we definitely have those training programs, but how it might relate to something that would be applicable to this group is, how does someone who maybe enters that apprenticeship or certification program go from there? And how is it, instead of a start, stop, and then a new career maybe to the next step, how does it actually feed into each other? So how does someone who starts off maybe in HVAC go into eventually maybe an engineer program, which would be more relevant to a group like this? And that is the whole, I know a lot of people work in we got to start exposure and that sort of thing. So a hiring trend that I would say to keep an eye on is the whole process. What are we seeing from even if you're going to go the K through 12 space, and how there are initiatives that are really focusing on certain programs in there, like engineering and other STEM exposures, but then how does it translate to the full hiring trend, which is, looking 5 years, 10 years out, which would then be more of our audience. And so thinking, I would say long-term in the hiring trend, and not so much in a 1 to 2 year hiring trend, if that makes sense too, as things are going up and down. I think there's going to be some bounce back, but I could be completely wrong too. So we'll see what happens. But I would love to hear, from other one. I just saw Jerry. Yes, thank you. I'm hoping other people will chime in, because this is a hard one to address: hiring trends, industry trends.
Yeah, thanks. Well, hard or impossible. So, are among our well-worn but appropriate phrases about transferable skills, if the more volatile a market, where particular sectors are expanding, contracting, new things pop up, old ones go away, the less fixed your skill set is, broadly writ, the more not that it's not important, that baseline, but the more adaptable you are, perhaps in that long run, the better position you'll be in. Ironically, we heard, the reminder that, some of our external board member, or at least one, said, I don't even read cover letters. Well, interesting juxtapositions. We worry about our students using AI to write those resumes and letters. We hear that in any case, they may not be read or actually are being read by some AI algorithm to select out resumes for a second look. And this past week, an interesting news report was unfortunately that this college, the recent, we're talking undergrads mainly, but it travels up the chain. The 2025 outlook is especially challenging at the moment. And the report said that not a few corporate entities are thinking through and perhaps carrying out identifying ways for AI to replace what we would consider as entry-level positions. So, we have AI being used to write the letters, AI reading the letters, and then AI doing the job. So it sounds like AI is talking to AI, which is not very good for our students. So, in the end, though, optimistically, though, masters can still be a sweet spot, especially with research and funding contractions, unfortunately, in this current environment. There may be a decline in doctoral level hiring, so that companies may turn more to master trained individuals. And honestly, we have to watch the other end too, because there are not a few interesting training programs out there where high school students or college, let alone college students, are being trained to do, what used to be thought of as very highly skilled, very technical tasks, whether assisted by, commercially available kits for the lab or AI or what have you. So there seems to be pressure on different ends of the spectrum. So maybe we can be optimistic, nevertheless, that masters will still be a sweet spot here, whether it's directly college into masters and then the job market, or retraining, as you were referencing, for upskilling from industry. So maybe that's still something we can hope to focus on during these, unfortunately, somewhat unpredictable times.
Mhm. Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, so I don't recall if we touched on this during the WAC meeting, but one thing that I consistently hear is that companies spend a lot of time training people that they hire. That if you can ensure that your student, your program, your educational philosophy strategy will provide them with a trained employee, that will make them very attractive. And so understanding what the specific hiring managers want and what the companies want and where they're seeing the gaps is something that we can fill that space with. And to the point about apprenticeship type programs, that kind of gets to the whole internship, externship, co-op type thing that makes can be a runway for students to help give them a leg up compared to students that don't have that work experience per se. And I know that a lot of our programs do that. So just embracing that and expanding that as much as possible I think would be a really attractive thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with that. I think the practical and as much industry applied experiences that we can give our students, that is going back to kind of our first one, how do they stand out? And I'm sure everyone here can say, oh yes, I have that same story, that they got the job because of that experience that they had during a program. It was either the professional network, it was the internship that the program required, but on the outcome it's what got them the job. It was that experience. It was that, I love how you put it, Beth, the runway to give them that leg up. So I agree. That's great.
And I'm glad you put it that way, because I feel like that can help us segue into the next topic, which is related to the first topic when we talked about standing out, which I think everyone's kind of getting at here. But it was pointed out that the human element is incredibly important and matters more than it used to. I remember one WAC member saying that pretty much anybody can sit behind a computer, take an online class and some technical thing and do what they need to do to get an A. But to really stand out, communication, networking skill, social skills are really, really important, even more so now than they used to be. So I wonder if we could chat a little bit about that. So Terry or Megan, would you like to kick it off?
Megan?
Yeah, I will give one of the stories that I thought it's really resonant. Not just I've been thinking about it a lot even since the WAC meeting is on this very topic, and it was in a finance department, and literally they hired a full-time non-finance person that had a background in educational instruction or something along those lines, because they were brought in full-time just to teach their team of very STEMmy number crunching people how to communicate, how to collaborate, how to get the information into a form that was readable and was able to be delivered to people outside of the finance department. And I thought that really was interesting. One, I'm like, oh, look at all the job opportunities for non-STEM people to join kind of like the STEM team and really help them flourish. And then also as an opportunity for our students, again, to really be that bridge to both kind of that technical side and how we can train them and give them as much coaching along the way to be those translating elements. And I just love the idea of the human element matters most. And I actually have the next line I'm going to say, I hope it actually sparks some pushback from some people. But in this world where I feel like the conversation is being pushed towards put your degree online because we can get a bigger reach, we could get more people, more students. They're like, I constantly am asked, can't your program be delivered 100% online? And I have to push back and say, well, there's certain human elements that we promote that are really hard to learn online behind a desk, as you said, Marcel. And I also know that a lot of our PSM programs are online. So I would love to actually hear the other side of like, what am I missing? How are we preparing people to be those human communicators from an online platform? I'm still not totally, I haven't figured out the secret sauce there. Terry.
So my secret sauce is that I do both. I do fully online and in person. It's more of a hybrid, but it's the same program except for a couple of classes that I can't do online. They've got to be hands-on, but not everyone needs those specific classes. But the issue with that is they want me to do 8-week asynchronous. And I push back, no, we can't do that. And that's back to Megan's comment. We need that personal touch. We need that collaboration between the students. We need that in order for it to work, not just as a PSM, but for the students, for them to be healthy professionals once they leave the program. But other things that Megan mentioned previously, with that human element and the understanding the communication piece is really, science is a story. No matter what science, it is a story, and we do have to train our students to pull that story out to provide to the ultimate audience, whether it be policymakers, whether it be the general community, whether it be other scientists. But there's so much information that gets lost in translation just from scientific words into the normal everyday community. So that's one of the things that I work on heavy with our students, because they're at the master's level, but they're still not getting it. This is still an issue. So really training them to tell the story that the data is telling us. To provide that to someone else is key. Beth.
Here,
Well, I don't want to keep like monopolize but anyway, so I kind of look at it from a standpoint of Um, in this world where there are international companies and companies where that are located at different sites, that teaching a student how to have a professional online presence is also important, and to be able to communicate that human element in an online setting is something that is professionally beneficial. Um, um, One thing that, as Terry was talking about, what master's students aren't able to communicate the scientific concepts in a lay terminology. I think that it really goes back to their undergraduate education when they're only exposed to science type classes. And so at least that's been my experience, that you almost have to um, train them to be able to communicate to a group of normal educated people that aren't necessarily scientists. Am I making sense? um so I and if I had my wish if I ever had to create a degree program from scratch, my ideal situation would be that there would be required residencies so that a student could do some of or most of the work or certain amount of the work online, but then they would be required to come to campus for a weekend, a week, whatever the program decides it's going to be. Um, um, so that mix is there. It gives people the flexibility, and you can still expand your scope with knowing that you're going to have that in-person component um, in your program. So that's kind of if I had my wish, but yeah, maybe someday.
I'm hearing a lot of similar ideas too with, institutions or our institution pushing me to be like, go online. And then the compromise is, well, then there'll be this, immersion experience that will help to fill in some of that. Terry, I had a quick follow-up before getting to Jerry's comment there. So you said that you had the same program, but one's completely online and one's a hybrid. And I was curious, if they're the same program, do you see a difference in outcomes or quality or even student perception?
I'm hoping not on the student perception, because the reason for me saying they're the same program, they're the same courses. In many cases, they are the exact same classes because we have the technology now to have people in Zoom and people in person at the same time, and they have discussions in real time. We just have to make sure that the class is designed in a way that they do interact, that they're forced to have that interaction, but our students are bringing great information with them. They're bringing great experiences. And that's what makes our classes work, is because they're teaching each other as much as I'm teaching them in many cases. But we have to be able to find that balance in a class, having online students and in person. But it's because we have Zoom and the technology to let the students interact that I think it's successful. Now, we do have a couple of classes that are in person only because they are hands-on in the field. We're the environmental sector. We have opportunities for the online students, though, if they want to come for a weekend workshop course, they can do that. They have learning ramping up to that point, and then they come for one intensive. Do they have to do that? No. But my struggle was, okay, how do we give them the extras? And some of the extras we do with the PSM is we have networking events. I've actually tried it a couple of times. It's been successful. It's getting better each time because there's hurdles every time. But I have hybrid networking events where I have our local external advisory board members, other industry members that come, our faculty, our current students that are local, our alumni who are local and online. They join here locally for a networking session, but then we have stations with iPads or these Mondo pads set up to where I will, and it's very intensive work on my end, but I will rotate people through to chat with those who are online in small groups in the online setting, and they get to ask our external advisory members or our students or alumni questions about what they do in industry and questions about the course, whatever it might be. And it's worked. Is it the exact same experience? No, we actually feed those who come locally. They get appetizers, they get snacks, they get more mingling than they do online, but it helps our online students.
Mhm. I love that. Meet them where they're at, right?
Yep.
Give them what we can. Jerry, I know you had a hand comment.
Yeah, similar vein follow-up first to Terry. You referenced in your prior comments, you referenced a they who seems to be encouraging 8-week asynchronous courses. I wondered if we dissect that apart a little bit. To me, there's three possible theys, or all of them. There's students, there's faculty, and there's the institution.
Yep.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So what's your sense, those three cohorts, with respect to, that model versus something else?
All right, so for our students in our program, our faculty, we don't like the 8-week model, the asynchronous model for most of our classes. It will work for a few. Most of those are the professional skills classes, but not all. But what they is the university. They are pushing us towards this online model. And we were online before they had this new online model. But we were online for a different reason. We were online because my students were getting jobs in the middle of the PSM and they were moving to out of state. And the classes we had that they needed to finish off, it's like, we could do this through Zoom. We could use technology to help them finish this process and make it interactive and get them what they need when they need it. So we decided to move, the program decided to move to online. And then after COVID, the university had this big push of, if you're online, it should be in this format. We want to sell this to more and more students and make it easier for them. And we want 8-week, we want asynchronous. But so far I've been able to push back because our classes with the science components, they can't be squashed into 8 weeks. You lose too much in many cases. We don't want them to be asynchronous because that interaction is key for our classes, for many of our classes, because like I said, they teach each other with some of their experiences and the questions and engagement. So we don't want to lose that. So if we can hold strong to that format, we can provide those who are local, who really want to sit in that classroom to get the most engagement, they can. But we get them flexibility so where their job takes them, or if they have to travel for their job, they can Zoom in.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks. And for you specifically, or any of us on the screen, the juxtaposition of online versus in person and the variance with respect to, we've heard a lot of comments about international students. Since these are federal, regulations regarding visas, doesn't matter where we are, who we are, state, local, private. How are we managing that juxtaposition? I know I always face questions from our international office for a new program or something. Oh, can you assure me about, how much, if anything, is online and so on? I presume we all face that challenge, and I wonder how we're, trying to navigate that one way or another.
So our program, since it is hybrid at minimum, online at best, it is not focused towards international students that are coming here on visa. We have had international students within our program successfully, but they've been taking it in the online format from their home country. But that means, one, their time has to line up to when is best for them to be in our classrooms, because we still have that in person, or that synchronous time set for classes. So it does impact the international. However, if we put more effort into it to make sure that we have these high flex courses, enough of them with the in-person sitting, we would be able to have international students here. I just haven't gotten to that point that we have enough in-person classes consistently that we can do students on a visa. But if you build your program in that format, you should be able to. But our university also we've hit this barrier with them that they said, we're putting a hiatus, or we're not allowing high flex anymore, even though we can do it well and it meets our students' needs. That's the irritating part. We're pushing back, trying to get that reestablished. But it was the international student that was a question, because they did have local international students here on a visa. They had in-person classes for them, but they were choosing to join online and not come into the classroom. So they wanted to cut down on that, because that's a requirement to have them here in the classroom. So if you can figure out how to have high flex and keep your international students in the classroom, then you've got it made.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments? So keeping an eye on the clock, I think one last topic that we talked about with the council was about funding. And so this is another thing, obviously everyone is a new challenge that everyone is facing right now. But as federal and institutional budgets tighten, there was some discussion about corporate partnerships and alternative funding pipelines that we had with the council. So any thoughts or reflections on that discussion?
I think, especially this community as well, there's always creative and collaborative industry program partnerships. What that looks like, I have seen a thousand different ways from this community, from industry funding and hiring students for temporary or internships or per project. So that can come at kind of that level, that runway area where we're giving them that that experience, that professional experience. But I think what we're also going to be seeing is, well, and I don't want to discredit that, the industry partnership is great, and our program should be focusing on that, because that's what really helps to create this this pipeline of students to industry, is like really creating those really solid relationships. But I'm also seeing this concern that's coming up as on the beginning, like how do students fund themselves to get into our programs? If soft funding, if federal funding is going to be going away, so that's not an option. And most of our programs are non-research oriented, so that may not apply. But they're also hearing that message, and so people are not even applying because they're like, well, there's absolutely no way I'm going to get funding, or it's a risk. And so actually, I don't have an answer or solution or insights. I actually am like pitching it out, like what else are other people hearing and thinking? Like, is there a concern on the front end, or do we just lean into what we do best, which is really fostering those industry relationships, and that will then grow the ecosystem at large for programs like ours?
Well,
For
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go, Jerry. Go,
I was
Jerry.
just
Well,
going to very quickly say they're not mutually exclusive, and a balanced portfolio probably is the safest place to be. Self-funding students, domestic financial aid students, corporate sponsorship. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive.
That's really
I
smart.
yeah, I agree. Depending on one specific funding source is kind of, it's from a financial planner point of view, it's not a good strategy. One and in that vein, like, we should also be aware that tuition remission and tuition reimbursement from companies is a a benefit that companies have, and they don't have to give that. And that's one of the things that they will take away in hard financial times. And there are restrictions as to how many credits or how much the students can take can get refunded every year. So that might delay their ability to go through the coursework. I think we need a donor. Anybody got a donor? Or we'd have like a silent auction or something. But it it we've seen it. And there's only so much that you can do, right?
Mhm.
Okay, well, we're just about at the end of the session. So does anyone else have any other closing comments? I don't know, Megan or Terry, did you want to say anything else about the 2025 meeting that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, so there were a few other areas that I wanted to note from the WAC that came out and that we are actually pulling in, like I said, into that NPSMA November conference. A couple of those, really, one is foundational. How do we make an external advisory board that is active and doing work for us, actually doing good what we need it to do? We're going to workshop that out, but we're also going to be taking a look at things like the importance of mentorship. Because one of the things my external advisory board mentioned before was that when I asked them about leadership skills and what skill sets they needed for leadership, they said they need to be a good mentor. And I know that's built into a PSM, that we have this mentor-mentee role that we do with them, at least through the capstone and internship processes. But are we training them
Mhm.
for that mentorship and that mentorship process, and to be a mentor, not just a mentee? So that's one of the things that we're going to look at strategies for in the conference.
There's also going to be a session, it's still getting a workshop though, about financing PSM programs. So really trying to bring to light some of these creative solutions and different almost revenue streams that to help create resiliency in programs when we're up against higher institution cuts and soft federal funds going away. How do we weather the storm, and what are some creative case studies that we can kind of look at and take from? So other little things too, which was a topic that we talked about in the WAC as well. And I also put my contact in the chat, so please reach out to me if anyone on this call wants to just continue this or other conversations or have completely left field questions. I'm happy to jump on a call whenever or communicate.
Well, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Terry. And thank you everyone for attending. This was a very nice session, a very informative session. And I hope to see all of you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.